Fuck yeah, motherfuckers. Brand new fucking Dark Angel right there, man. Fucking Extinction Level Event. And that is some Extinction Level fucking drumming on that shit, man. Fuck, dude. Holy fuck. Before that, we played some Testament, Night of the Witch. And, you know what? Let's call Gene up right... Well, actually, I'm not calling him up. I gotta connect to the fucking Zoom meeting. Let's connect to Zoom right now and see what the fuck is going on in their world, man.
Dongle going to those connectors here. Let's see, Gene. Come on, baby. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Can you hear me? There you go.
We can hear you loud and clear, man.
Excellent. Now we are rolling. Excellent, Zach. How are you, Zach Moonshine?
Man, I'm doing great, dude. We just we were blasting away at some Testament, Night of the Witch. I love that track, by the way. And then, of course, the brand new Dark Angel track, man.
Right on, brother. I hope you dig that one too.
I do, man. I do. You know what? You're on a lot of records that are some of my favorite records, man. It's pretty cool.
Well, kick ass, man. That's awesome, Zach. Thank you.
Hell yeah, dude. Hell yeah. So, well, obviously, man. I mean, it's all about Dark Angel right now, dude. Tell us what's going on, man. You guys just launched this new track. Just came out of nowhere, it seemed like, and it's blowing up, dude. It's fucking awesome.
Excellent. Well, thank you for saying it's coming out of nowhere, because I know about a decade ago I just blurted out in an interview one time, yeah, you know, hey, we're writing a new record and we're gonna get this thing out as soon as we can. And that was a decade ago, and hey, man, just thank you for everybody whose patience has been at a premium here, but we are finally moving forward on getting the new Dark Angel album, Extinction Level Event, out and coming to everybody really soon. Definitely before the end of the fourth quarter of 2025, you know, so we've got a number of songs in the can. We're just kind of releasing a little bit here and there. And so the first release was the title track. And, you know, this is kind of the most, you know, just a pretty darn blistering Dark Angel track. You know, it was written by our recently departed brother Jim Durkin. You know, the music was anyway, and about a decade ago or so, when we got back together and we started playing some shows, and the vibe was so cool, and everybody was just having a great time, and we had all kind of grown up into men, you know, as it were. You know, we were just having a great time together. And, you know, Jim took me aside one time. He's like, hey, man, you know, I have this song that I wrote pretty recently, and it was just like, if we ever get a chance to do any kind of recording with Dark Angel, or do any kind of Dark Angel stuff, this is my most Dark Angel-esque song that I've got. And I was like, hey, man, lay it on me. And I was just so blown away by it. It was just so killer, so catchy, so killer, so Jim Durkin-like. And so, you know, that song there, as well as another one that he had in the works, just got me so pumped that I just happened to do an interview pretty recently after that. And I was like, yeah, man, we're going to record a new record. Yeah, it's going to be coming really soon. And like I said, it's taken over a decade, but here we are, and you know, our first track, Extinction Level Event, is out there, and so people check it out. I'm really stoked about the new album. And by the way, Zach, as you probably noticed, you don't have to ask Gene a lot of questions. You can chat on his own, you know. So,
hell yeah.
So stop me at any time, because I can go and go and go, man.
No, that's fine, man. Yeah, you know, that's cool, man. That's really cool that the story behind that, like, that's a really cool tribute to do for him as well, you know. I mean... Righteous, yeah, man. You know, and... Yeah, it took a long time, but, you know, fuck it, man. It's better late than never, you know.
I agree, you know, and it's been, you know, now over 3 decades since the last Dark Angel record, and... like, the reason that we, you know, released this track first, all the tracks on the album, any one of them could have been our first release, but this was just kind of the most it's one of the more, well, we have a lot of savagely blistering tracks on this record. This is one of them, and it was just so kick-ass, Dark Angel, such a Dark Angel type song that, we didn't release this first one because Jim wrote it, and this was kind of his last, final entire song that he left with us. It just kind of worked out that way. It's like, this is a really kick-ass track, and it's got a cool title, and all the artwork that goes along with the album goes along with this, so there you go.
Hell yeah, man. Well, yeah, I remember discovering you guys. I'd read about you guys when I was really young, but didn't hear a lot about it on the radio or anything like that. This is way, pre-internet days. But I remember going into a record store, and they had a used section, and they had some tapes in there, and they had Leave Scars. And I picked it up and looked at it, and I was like, this is fucking scary, man. I don't know what the fuck this is, but it was like $5 or something, so I was like, fuck it, I'm going to grab it, man.
Right.
Hell yeah, dude. That's fucking badass.
Yeah, well, kick ass. Right on, brother. Thank you.
Tell us about the give us a brief history rundown of Dark Angel. Like, how did it start, and how did you guys?
Well, I can synopsize this as quickly as I can, and this is kind of a really fun little story. That Dark Angel was actually formed at the same time, at the same high school, at the same time as Metallica. Dark Angel was just a couple of grades younger than the Metallica guys, and but I remember Jim Durkin pulling out his Downey high school yearbook, and there's like James Hetfield and Ron McGovney, their original bassists. They were seniors, and Jim and Rob Yon, our bassist, and the other vocalist, they were like 10th graders at the time. But that was about the time they put Dark Angel together, in high school, real kids in high school. And so in 1984, the album We Have Arrived was recorded, and it might have been released in 84, early 85. And then I joined the band in very late 84. I remember it was December 10th, 1984. I just happen to remember that date. And then in 1986, we released the second album, Darkness Descends, and got to play with a whole ton of kick-ass bands, like everybody from. We've been playing with Slayer and Megadeth for years and years by then. We got to play with Motorhead and the Cro-Mags, and a bunch of kick-ass shows like with Possessed and Death Angel and Corrosion of Conformity, and just tons of great bands that we got to play with, Nuclear Assault and all that. And then Leave Scars came out in 1989. And that was our first album with our vocalist for life since then, Ron Reinhardt. And, that album was killer. We got to do a lot of great touring with that one. And then in 1991, we released Time Does Not Heal. And that was with our new guitarist at that time, Brett Erickson. He was the newest member of the band then. And then pretty much after, before we got to release or record what was going to become the next album, we just sort of dissolved, just kind of went on hiatus. There was no big arguments, there was nothing. It just kind of drifted apart, for a little bit, musically, that kind of thing. And I ended up joining Death pretty quickly after that, and then my career went off in some crazy directions like that. And so in 2013 or so, we kind of got back together, started chatting about possibly just putting the band back together, dude. Play a few shows here and there, and those shows went really, really well. And so we just decided to kind of move forward and play as many shows as we could, and which has led us to here in 2025 with a new record coming out.
God, man, that record that you did with Death, the first one, Individual Thought Patterns, man, that's the first Death album that I bought, as a matter of fact.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Righteous.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty good.
I had I'd seen the video on there was like a monthly subscription thing at the time. It was like Metal Video Monthly or something that you could fucking get. It was like $10 a month or some shit, and they would send you a video, and it would have a bunch of different bands on it. And I remember they had The Philosopher on there, and that riff.
Nice.
I was like, oh my god, dude, this is so fucking heavy. Like
Excellent. Right on, Zach. That's killer, man. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Hell yeah, dude. But your drumming on that record was fucking insane. Symbolic, of course, as well, dude. And then
thank you very much.
Testament and fucking yeah. I mean, Testament's insane. I'm pretty sure I've seen you with them live a few times, matter of fact. I
wouldn't be surprised, absolutely. Are you based in Tennessee? You know, we played Nashville, Knoxville, all sorts of places like that.
Well, I live here now, but I was living in Phoenix, Arizona for a long time. That's where I went to a lot. That's where I seen you guys.
Right. I believe it, yeah. Played a lot of shows in Phoenix over the years, totally.
Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah. How did that gig come about with Testament?
Well, originally back in like 1996, I think it was, Chuck had called me up and said, "Hey, man, Eric and I we're looking for a drummer. You know, might you have some little time available or anything?" And at that time, I had just kind of completed the kind of the Death symbolic era touring and things, and so I was just I was putting a new project together, and so I went up to the Bay Area, spent a few months up there, and the album that resulted in was the album Demonic, and that was a pretty kick-ass Testament record, if you ask me. I really dug that album, and I think it might have been a little kind of extreme for some of their fans who weren't quite ready for Testament to go in such a kind of a dark and non-melodic sort of direction. Chuck Billy just bringing the death vocals out like crazy. I mean, he does death vocals like he's really good at it.
Yeah.
That man rumbles the ground when he goes into that, into the death growl. So, that was a pretty cool record if you ask me. And then, a number of years after that, 15 years later, Chuck reached out again and said, "Hey, man, we have Paul Bostaff drumming for us. However, Paul has an injury, and we need to get in the studio pretty quick. We got some deadlines coming up for our next album to come out. How would you feel about coming up and spending some time up here and seeing what we can do about putting a new record together?" And they had all the material pretty much ready to go. So I was just completing my time with Fear Factory at the time, and so Chuck had reached out at pretty much the perfect time schedule-wise for me. I was like, man, I've got a little bit of time available here, so let's get together and try this. And the album that resulted in was The Dark Roots of Earth, and I remember at that time it was they had John Tempesta doing their live drumming for them, and Chuck reached out, because it was just going to pretty much be the album, and then whatever else we'll see kind of thing. But I did the record, and then when they were out on the road with Anthrax, Chuck had reached out and said, "Hey man, we have some touring plans going on, and Johnny T can't make about 2 weeks of touring because he's also in the Cult, and the Cult has some things planned right in the middle of our tour. Can you maybe just step in for a couple of weeks?" And
another great band too.
Right, yeah. And so I was in the process of doing a record at that time, right at that time. So it was like, okay, well, I think what can happen is I can finish the album that I'll be working on. That's going to be in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And the very next morning after I complete that record, I could fly down to Dallas and meet you guys in Dallas and play the show that night. And so I was working on this record. It was a Viking album, band called Viking.
Yeah.
And I finished that album. The next morning, I'm on the plane, and that's when I learned all the material that they were going to be doing, at the show that night. And so I landed in Dallas, and we played the show, and went off without a hitch. And I just, burned all the songs in my brain over the course of a few hour plane ride kind of thing.
Holy
sitting around
fuck, man.
Yeah, so
that's crazy, dude.
I'm. it's not the first time I've had to do that, and it wasn't the last time either. So it's happened a number of times before and since, where you have no time to learn any of this, but can you learn it and be on stage with us tomorrow night and be on a plane as well? It's like, yeah, sure, man. I love challenges, and hey, man, it's just entertainment, folks. It's a good time to, if everybody's having a good time and you're playing and you don't make any mistakes, then beautiful. There you go.
That is some pro fucking shit right there, man. Though, like, damn, dude, one night, fuck.
Right, yeah. One afternoon, one morning on the plane, kind of thing. However, since it was Testament, there were a number of songs that you do kind of already, you're familiar with, kind of thing. Like songs like "Into the Pit" and "The New Order" and things off the first couple of records here and there that you've heard them enough time. You got a basic gist of them, but then there was some of the kind of deeper cuts that they were playing where I'm like, I'm really not familiar with a lot of these tunes. So, but hey man, we'll wing it and we'll figure it out. And we did a pretty good job, And then a month or so later, I was also playing with Anthrax for both shows. I was doing double duty because Charlie had come to me and said, hey, I've got kind of a family medical emergency back home. I'm going to have to be in and out of this tour that we are just starting right now with Testament and Death Angel.
Wow.
Might you be able to, fill in, when I can't be here? And I was like, absolutely, Charlie, no problem. So I learned all their set overnight as well. It took 2 nights. And, I remember he asked me on a Monday, and I'm pretty sure by Thursday, the next show, by the show on Thursday. So I took 2 nights. I sat behind his drums and I filmed him playing the stuff. And then on Thursday night, because he was like, I got to go ASAP. I have to leave. So I'm like, give me a couple nights, let me learn your stuff, and then we'll take care of this. We'll manage this. And sure enough, we did. And that was pretty crazy. That was pretty insane. And I remember that, Charlie had, he had augmented the arrangement so much. Like, he was not playing the same drum fills from the record, because I was thinking, well, everybody knows a lot of Anthrax songs, but he was changing so many things. And I thought, well, gosh, if I were to just go back and learn the album versions, which are a lot of them are really different than what's going on here. The other 4 guys on stage might be a little confused, like, hey, wait a minute, that's from the record. We're not right. We're used to how Charlie plays it. So that's why I filmed him, and I learned all his licks that he was doing right then and right there. All the different arrangements and little breakdowns that aren't on the record, little things like that. And so that's where everybody from Anthrax was just kind of like, hey, wait a minute, we were going to be happy if he just learned the album versions, but here he is playing Charlie's licks and fills, and it's like Charlie's back there like crazy. So there you go there. Just went the little extra yard there, and that's a fun extra challenge, man. I love challenging myself, so there you go.
That is cool as hell, man. Shit, man. Fuck.
Thanks.
Yeah, man. And then I was gonna ask you, a fucking strapping young lad too, man. Like that's some insane shit right there. That's one of my favorite. The self-titled record that you guys did.
Right.
That's one of my favorites, man, from that era.
Nice. Yeah, I got to admit, that was of all the strapping records that I was a part of, that would be my least favorite of them. Because, a few years earlier, we had this album called City.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Man, that thing was just mind-blowing. That just came so far out of left field for everybody, and we just came out just elbows and knuckles on that one, man. That was just just throwing blows at everything, and so that was a pretty killer record. And Alien, which followed, the self-titled record, SYL or whatever that one was called. We always called it the Chicken Feather record. It's got a feather on the cover, so it's Chicken Feather. Alien was pretty killer. The New Black was pretty killer. So there you go. Yeah, strapping was a really fun period. A learning process. Absolutely. I moved up to Vancouver, Canada for a dozen years while we were doing all sorts of strapping stuff, and I got really involved in the Vancouver music scene, the Vancouver metal scene, which was really exciting at the time. So that was pretty cool. So yeah, man. Hell yeah,
dude. That is badass. And I was just thinking about the Testament thing too. I've had Chuck and both Chuck and Steve on the show before. Both really nice guys too, as well. By the way,
excellent.
And then also recently I had James Murphy on the show as well, and he was talking about some Testament stuff too. So it's
right on.
It's pretty cool that you're here right now talking about it as well, man. I mean,
nice.
Yeah, man. It's cool that you guys all. Just the way that you move around and and do all these things, I can't imagine how. That's a lot of stuff for you to learn, man. But you seem to. It doesn't faze you, man. You just take it on, man. It's like you said, you like challenges.
And this is the only thing I've ever done with my life. I've been on tour since I was pretty regularly since I was 16 years old. So. My first ever tour was Slayer's first ever tour. I was their light guy. That's a pretty well-known story there. So I'm 16 years old on tour with Slayer. So it kind of hasn't stopped since then. This is all I've ever done in my adult life. Excuse me. And shortly after that tour, I joined Dark Angel, and that was such an eye-opening experience. All the kick-ass stuff that Dark Angel got to do and still gets to do, as a matter of fact, just last week, 5 days ago, we were in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and we played the Bangers Open Air Fest, and that was so killer. I mean, everybody, check out the YouTubes of that, because the show was just so devastating. And we rehearsed for that show. We had one night of rehearsal together, because I've been on tour since, early March or something like that, pretty nonstop. And so the only time we were going to get to rehearse was the night before the show in Sao Paulo. And that was when we learned that Eric Meyer, our guitarist, was not going to be able to make the show. He missed the flight with the rest of the guys the night before, and so they had him at the airport all day trying to get him another flight, and then that flight got canceled. So we are in the middle of rehearsal when we get the news hey, man, Eric, he's not going to make the show, and Laura Christine, our guitarist, man, she just put all the material right on her back and just said, all right, well, right here and now, I'm gonna figure out all of Eric's parts. I'm gonna play his parts. I'm gonna play my parts. I'm gonna play some of his leads. Here's my leads, and she just stepped up huge time. So way to go, Laura Christine, man. That was a pretty phenomenal just feat that she did, and the show came out killer. I mean, our sound guy, AK, is one of the best in the world, and he works for a bunch of kick-ass bands, and he had our sound dialed in. I swear to God, that was the tightest show you've ever heard Dark Angel ever. So that was pretty cool. And so, what could have been just a really disheartening event turned into this kick-ass challenge that we all stepped up for. Ron, our vocalist, he stepped it up, and our bassist Gons, he's so tight, and we all just put it on ourselves to make this the tightest show we could. And was it perfect? No, but it was killer. It was great. So we're still reeling off the high of that kick-ass show. That was really, really cool. So, in Dark Angel, we head out at the end of this month, the beginning part of June, and we're heading over to Europe, and we're playing a bunch of shows in the UK and Germany and the Netherlands. And we're doing a Darkness Descends in its entirety show, for all of those. And so that's going to be pretty cool. And then directly from that, and before we hit the road with that, I'm pretty sure Dark Angel's going to have another single release. So that's going to be pretty killer. And one thing that's pretty cool about the upcoming record is that I love the artwork on the album. I went to my artist Kane Gillis, like a couple of years ago with some templates of ideas, with some lyrical ideas, and one thing like for the bonus LP and the bonus CD, we've got like all this artwork that is individualized for each track, for each panel of each song. We tried to make as many panels like directly attributable to the lyrics, the artwork on there. It's just they're kind of like comic books, just like telling a story with the artwork, and the story that it's telling is the story of the lyrics, and just in a single panel. And Kane worked for that for 2+ years on it, and that's pretty darn cool, man. It was a lot of the. He told me that he ended up spending over 2,000 hours working on the artwork for the record. So I'm like, God dang, that's amazing. And it's so killer. It's just, it's really cool. So I'm really excited about all things Dark Angel right now, and all the touring that we got coming up, and the album, and we're just stoked to, have a new record out for everybody. And hey, man, if people dig it, great. If they don't, hey, that's your prerogative. And I dig it. That's all that matters to me, man. I love the album. So I'm stoked. So there you go.
Hell yeah. The artwork is fucking amazing. And I was just actually telling somebody earlier, like, I think the flyer that I made for this fucking show, where I put the old school logo on top of the new artwork, and the way that it looks with the flames and everything, it's one of my favorite fucking flyers I think I've ever made, man. Like, just looking at it, I'm like, fuck, that is fucking badass, man. That's
right
cool.
on, Zach. That's awesome.
It's cool, dude.
We love things that are badass, I tell you. So
yeah,
I'm all about it.
You got the bat wings and shit on the. You guys have always had one of the coolest logos, anyway. I mean, period. But it's got bat wings, right, dude. You can't go wrong with bat wings, man. Absolutely.
Since '83, there have been bat wings to the Dark Angel logo. Absolutely.
Hell yeah, dude. You were mentioning fucking Slayer in the early days too, man. That's another one of my favorite bands too, man. It's funny, anytime somebody posts one of those things on Facebook or something where they're asking, like, what's the band that you've seen the most live? I'm always at a toss. I'm not sure if it's either Slayer or Ozzy, because I've lost count, on both of them, because they just seem to come through wherever I was at so many times. I was always there.
Right. You can't go wrong with either band. Absolutely.
No, hell yeah, man. Well, tell us about your drum, like playing the drums. Like, where did it start for you? Because everybody calls you, what do they call you? The atomic clock.
Oh, right. Yeah.
How did it start, man? Where did you begin to pick up the sticks and learn this craft and get to where you are, man?
Well, I can remember in second grade, I was 7 years old, and I just remember always pounding on my desk, and that's back when your desks were, your little elementary school desks. They were
made of wood.
The desks. Yeah, and you could lift up the lid and put all your books and your lunch inside it, and that just always had a really cool tone to me. So I just remember using my fingers and teaching myself double strokes, left, right, left, right, and just pounding on those, driving the teachers crazy, driving the other students crazy, and all that kind of stuff. And I remember like when I really, like I've always been into music. I was always, into like the American Top 40 from about 1969 through around 76 or so. Like when disco started coming around, I started kind of fading away from that, but that was around the same time that my older cousin, my older sister were introducing me to all the rock and roll that was out there. 1976, you had Kiss Destroyer had just come out, and Cheap Trick and Aerosmith and Ted Nugent and Queen and Black Sabbath and Blue Oyster Cult. All these kick-ass bands are just doing their thing at the time, and I just got enamored by all the what turned into classic rock, and so with that in mind, I remember just air drumming to Kiss albums and Rush albums, and I picked up a cheap little pair of sticks and I was air drumming to them, but I was like really trying to emulate what each drummer was doing. It's like I just wasn't just flailing my arms wildly. It was like I was trying to I was learning, like, hey, I can make out what the hi-hat is doing. I can make out what the snare's doing, what the kick's doing, crashes, what a ride cymbal is. When the drummer does a fill, I can fully make out what every drummer is doing. So I would just air drum to all those things. And so by the time, a few years later, when I got on my very first kit, I kind of had an aptitude for it, because I'd been, quote unquote faking it for 4 years, but trying to do a good job at it. And so I remember the first time I sat on a kit, it was with I went with my cousin who was 6 years older than me, so he was 18. He had his band going, and we went to their rehearsal before any of the guys showed up, and I sat behind the kit and we just jammed a bunch of tunes, and he's like, "Wait a minute, dude, like, what?" I thought you were going to be horrible, but, here we are jamming to Rainbow and Grand Funk Railroad, and you're holding your own, like, what in the world? And I'm like, this is my first time on a kit, but I've been playing all these songs that we just played, just sitting in my bedroom with an invisible drum kit, and my air drum kit was huge. Let me tell you, it was huge. It was Neil Peart size. I had a giant air drum kit, and so at that I just kind of had an aptitude for it, and so it just kind of took off from there. By the time I was like about 13 or so, I got my first drums and my first set of drums and a little 5-piece kit, and I played the hell out of it, So there you go.
That's awesome, man. That is really cool. And well, I got to ask, big shout out to Reversed Records for reaching out to me to do this interview. But how did you guys get hooked up with them, and how did that all go about?
Well, the president of Reversed Records, Rob Shallcross, he's a recording engineer as well, and he and I met at the studio as on the first day that that Strapping Young Lad was recording The New Black. He was brought in by our producer on that record, Sean Thingbold, our engineer, as a second engineer, as a just an assistant. And Rob and I met and we hit it off, and we've done just dozens of recording projects together. We've done full albums, we've done a ton of things, and we're both living up in Vancouver at the time, so it was real easy to work together. And so in around, I guess maybe 2011 or so, there was a few things that were going on where I kind of needed a little bit of assisting, or these are all kind of managerial things that I needed, like, can somebody assist me in I'm trying to put some clinics together and also some recording contracts, and I'm not a good self-negotiator because I give in too easily. I say yes too easily, and Rob had offered himself like, hey, if you want me to take over some of this stuff, I'm happy to say no, because I value you and your worth, and I'll get you what you deserve. And I was like, that sounds cool to me. So I don't have to do anything. You do all the work, and I just kind of show up and play drums. He's like, essentially, yeah. If you want this to work like that, we can make this work like that. And so it's been 15 years ish since that went down, and we've been working together on tons of projects as well. And Rob is the producer of Extinction Level Event, and that's how that went. So we've worked together a lot in the studio, and we've worked together a lot as manager and artist, and he values me, and he values all of the projects that I'm involved with. Dark Angel, he values all the guys in Dark Angel. He values Death to All. He's also in charge of that one. So we're able to do things really smoothly, and he takes care of all the day-to-day kind of stuff, which allows me to concentrate on the music, which that's the more important part anyway. So there you go. That is, in a nutshell, how that works.
You mentioned saying yes a lot, and that reminds me of some article that I read recently, and I can't remember now who it was, but somebody was saying like the key to their success was just accept everything, say yes to everything, and just fucking go with it. I'm like, fuck, man. I don't know, that could go both ways though.
Well, I tell you, when you are starting out and when you can, absolutely say yes, because that's like for instance, when I was 15, maybe 16, I remember, I went to all the Slayer shows in L.A., and they were a tiny L.A. band, they were too heavy for L.A., they had a good solid 30-person following. About the same 25, 30 people would show up at their shows, and that was it, for an entire year, because they were just too brutal, too heavy. In 83, this was all, just, L.A. was
Motley Crue and
Motley Crue and all that's a Quiet Riot and all that kind of thing, and Slayer was just too brutal for that, and Dark Angel was playing a bunch of shows with them at that time. But I remember showing up at one of their shows. I went to all of them. They played 2 times a week. They played twice a week all over town. And so, I showed up at one of their shows, and I was already pals with them for a long time. I had already sung background on Show No Mercy at that time. That Evil Has No Boundaries. My voice is one of the voices on that.
No shit.
Yeah,
that's cool. I didn't know that.
Right, and that was my idea. As a matter of fact, I remember it was time for Jeff and Carrie to go sing their background vocals, and because they would do that song live, and it was always kind of like, "Evo, my words defy Evo." You'd probably see it on YouTube or something. One of the old things.
Yeah.
And it was never that heavy, So I remember there was Tom and Carrie sitting on the couch there. We were at the studio. It was about time for them to go do their thing. And I remember mentioning to those two guys, I was like, "Hey, dude, you ever thought about getting a big gang of dudes in there, just like singing, Evo, big gang chorus or anything? And you ever thought of that?" And they looked at each other like, "Great idea. No time like the present. All right, everybody here, get in the vocal booth. You're about to sing on it." So that was pretty cool. But yeah, a few months after that, I was at one of their shows during whatever, and Tom came up to me and said, "Hey man, our light guy can't make it tonight." And he points at the tiny little light board. It's about the size of an iPad, with 8 little buttons on it.
Yeah.
He's like, do you think you could run that board there? I'd never done anything like that in my life, but I nodded and said, "Yes, I could. Of course, I can.
It's a challenge.
No problem." Right. And so, yes. And then so the next week after that, it was the exact same thing. Like, "Hey, man, our light guy can't make it again. So, hey, can you do it again?" I was like, "Of course." And so it got to the point where I would show up at the shows and just walk straight to the light board. Slayer's coming on stage, and run lights for them. And that's when a few months, a year or so later, it was time for them to go on the road for the first time. And I remember Tom telling me not all that long ago, like about 5 years ago, he's like, yeah, I had to go to your house and talk to your parents, and get their permission, because I was like, crazy. I don't even remember that happening. He's like, well, you were a minor, and, we had to get your folks' permission, because I was 16 years old. And so that's pretty cool. Now it's pretty fun. But yeah, say yes, and about 5 years or so ago, when Slayer and Testament, we were both on Slayer's initial run of their, farewell tour. Testament did the very first 2 legs of it, and myself and Willie Adler from Lamb of God, and I know, a couple of the other Testament guys, and, a few of the other bands, every time Slayer would go on stage, we would go out to the front of house and go sit by the soundboard and watch the show, because Slayer's show was over the top incredible. The pyro was just so evil and so sick and killer. Their whole show was awesome. And they were playing a bunch of outdoor sheds, the outdoor amphitheaters with the big lawn, the lawn seats way up top in the back, where, to those people, the band looked like ants. They're tiny. And one thing that we were all noticing was that the video screens, whoever was in charge of their video screens on the side of the stage, following the band, was every night was just doing this really horrible job of it. They're just terrible. And so, I later learned that Slayer they didn't have their own dedicated video screen guy. I didn't know how that was working, but it was just terrible every night. It's like, here's, like say, it was well known. There's Gary Holt peeling off this kick-ass lead, and there's the camera filming Tom staring at Paul, like not on Gary at all. And I'm looking around like the lawn section. I'm just like, those folks are getting ripped off, man. Like, this is the last time ever to be able to see Slayer, and you really rely on those screens when you're sitting way up there in the lawn. And so I went to the dudes and I said, hey man, are you guys aware of how bad your screens are? They're like, yes, and that's when I learned they don't have their own guy. They're just using the local guy every single night, and he doesn't know their material, whoever it is, usually some 65-year-old country music band, doesn't understand heavy metal or Slayer music at all. So I said, hey, I've never done this before, but you want to give me a shot at this? I guarantee you I can do. I have no idea how to do this. I will figure that part out real quick, and I guarantee you I can do a ton better job than the local jabroni that you get every single night to do this. So and they were like, please, would you? I was like, sure, let's, your fans deserve this. You're Slayer. You deserve this. So every night I was learning how to run I got the headphones on. I'm talking to camera one. Camera one, get your vocalist. Camera two, get your bald guy. And camera three, move over to the stage right guitarist. And okay, camera four, get on drummer right here. Drummer, drum solo. I'm pushing all the buttons. I'm doing all the faders. I'm talking to all the camera guys, which was killer. I'd play with Testament. And on that tour, I was doing a lot of shows with Anthrax as well. So I would play with Testament, and then I would go play with Anthrax, and then after that, I'd grab a quick shower, and then I'd be in the booth doing the Slayer videos. Man, that was the funnest tour ever. Man, that was a great tour. So, and that was just because I said yes. Like, I could do this. I offered myself up. Like, like, I'll figure it out, man. So there you go. That's pretty fun.
Dude, I it's funny. I'm sitting here listening to you talk about that, and I totally identify with that, but on a totally different thing. Like, for a long time, before I started doing this whole thing full time, I was in the auto manufacturing business for a long time. I worked in a factory, and I was that guy that would do that. Like, anytime on Friday or Saturday when they would ask, who wants overtime, does anybody know how to run these machines, I would always raise my hand, even though I knew for fuck that I did not know, and I'd never ran that machine before. I would always raise my hand anyway. I'd be like, yeah, I can do it. And then as soon as the boss would leave, I'd go run over there and ask the dude that's doing it, real quick. I'd be like, hey, man, give me a breakdown real quick of how do you do this on break time, and I would get it. And then eventually I became the go-to guy that anytime they needed help with anything extra, they just came to me and really, Zach, come on. And it works, like, they didn't know, they didn't care, as long as I was getting in there and doing it right, and like you said, man, yeah, I'd be telling them, yeah, I could do that, I could do it faster, man.
Right, absolutely, man. That's the way to do it. You put yourself out there, and then good things come from opportunities like that, always, and that's when you get to the point where you've had so many amazing opportunities, you built yourself up to this kind of legendary status, and that's when you could start saying, okay, I can start saying no to things now and get super selective and only select the things that I want to do. And that's how I'm kind of the poster child for living one's dream, like I when I was 11 years old, that's when I decided I'm going to do exactly this that I'm doing now. And by the time I was like 13 or so, it was cemented and solidified that, like, definitely this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to play drums for a living. I'm going to be in kick-ass bands. I'm going to tour the world. I'm going to see the world. I'm going to play great concerts. I'm going to be with a bunch of kick-ass musicians and make a lot of killer friends and create some serious memories for myself. And so, I am definitely the poster child for that. So I'm in a very fortunate position. Absolutely.
Just will it into existence, man.
I sure did. There's so many times where I was like, hey, I will that. When something kick-ass happens, I'm like, I will that. So darn tootin'.
Well, what's coming up next for you guys, man? What I know you said that you've got a new single that's possibly going to be dropping soon at some point.
Right. That's some new Dark Angel action there. We're super stoked on that. And like I say, we've got that Dark Angel run of Europe. It's coming up real quick. We're going to spend a lot of time. Dark Angel is in Europe over summer. And I know we're working on some U.S. plans after that at some point. Those will start solidifying pretty soon, so that's pretty cool. And in the interim, in the meantime, like before that Dark Angel run, in a couple of weeks or so, I leave on a very short U.S. run with a guy named Bear McCreary. And I don't know who might be familiar with him, but he does all the music for, like, say, The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
And he's a composer and orchestrator, and he's worked with Dethklok before. He did all the orchestrations on the Doomstar Requiem and the latest Dethklok movie, Army of the Doomstar. And he and the Dethklok guys, we all worked on the Godzilla King of the Monsters movie. We did some stuff for that together, and Bear does things for, like, he's what's the new show on Amazon, the Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power. He does all the music for that.
Yeah.
And we did a kick-ass song with Jens Kidman for that show. And about a year or so ago, Bear, pretty much a year this week, I think, Bear released his solo record called The Singularity, and that is a pretty kick-ass record, man. It's pretty awesome, and it's got just guest stars all over the place. Everybody from, Serge Tonkian to Corey Taylor, Slash, Joe Satriani, Laura Christine, Scott Ian, Brendan from Dethklok, Brendan Small, Guthrie Govan on guitar, God, just a lot of crazy vocalists, you name it. And the album's really, really good. It's a killer, heavy record, heavy metal, rock, whatever. It's a really good album. So check that out. The Singularity, it's pretty good. And, Bear, since he does all this other, soundtrack stuff, he does video game soundtracks like for God of War and things like that. He does all that music.
Hell yeah.
So we just got back from a European run where we're doing a lot of songs from Singularity, and a lot of the songs that Bear's following are real familiar with. The songs from the movies and the TV shows and the video games and all that kind of stuff that his audience is real familiar with. So we just kind of did an amalgamation of a bunch of the Bear music out there. And so we have a U.S. run starting up with that. Like, we're playing New York City, the Gramercy Theater in a couple of weeks. We're playing up in Canada and, playing Boston, I think, and then Chicago. So, anybody out there, just, if you're interested, check it out. It's a pretty cool show. There's that. And then I leave directly for Europe with Dark Angel after that. And then directly after the Dark Angel run, we have a Dethklok run over in Europe. Dethklok's going to Europe for the very first time. So we're playing Hellfest and Grasspop and Copenhagen and a couple of other places. So that's going to be Dethklok's first time over there. We're going to dominate over there next. So that's going to be pretty awesome. And then Dark Angel, like I say, we finish off the month of July, or we finish off the month of June anyway in Europe, and then we go back there in August doing a bunch of stuff like that. So it's pretty darn busy. I'm pretty darn booked up until about 2026 or so. So
that's awesome, dude.
I'm indeed in a very fortunate position. Absolutely.
Man.
I never complain, like when the schedule starts, because there's a lot of times when it's like a tour finishes, I come home, do a load of laundry, and I'm on a plane that day, that next morning, that kind of thing. I'm not home a lot for this little period of time, but I never complain about it. I always tell myself, well, dude, you asked for this. When you were 11 years old, when you were 13 years old, saying this is what you want to do, you asked for this. So you made this happen, so I better not hear you complaining. So I don't complain about it.
What's it like playing in front of some of those massive crowds? Because I know you've had to step out on stage before at some point and just look out there and just be like, holy shit. What?
Well, I got to admit that it's like whether it's 30 people or 300 people or 3,000 people or 30,000 or 300,000, whatever.
It doesn't matter. It's all the same, right?
Because I'm so into the music, like, I am definitely here to make sure every fan has a great time. And if that means that I need to really focus on the music and focus on my job, that's my job, to entertain people. So it's my job to get good rest. I take a nap before every show, and I try to get as good a rest as I can. I don't party. I don't party or anything. I don't do drugs. I don't do any of that. So it's my job to make sure that everybody is entertained. And also, it's my job to make sure that the other guys in the band have that rock-solid drumming going on that they expect. So the only people there that I am trying to impress is the other folks that are on stage, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's like I don't have the direct connection with the audience, especially with some of the size of places that I've started to play over the last decade and a half or so. But what I can do is dedicate myself to giving them the performance that they deserve, So in that regard, that is my one-on-one contact with the audience, is that you guys are here to get your faces rocked off, and I am here to kick you in the face myself. I'm here to entertain you. I'm here to make sure that you walk out of here with a huge smile on your face. That is very important to me. So that is, I guess, that's how I get off with playing live in front of, no matter the size of people, the amount of folks that are there. It's not important, but everybody's well-being is important. Everybody walking out of there just going, yeah, what a killer show. Excellent. Then I've done my job well. So there you go.
What's the biggest audience that you think you've played at? Do you know?
I think it might have been with Strapping Young Lad at the World Cup in Seoul, South Korea in 2002. We were the opening act for the World Cup opening ceremonies. We were the closing act of the opening ceremony. So there was 250,000 people there, and this big giant big screen TV on the stage, the big screen right behind us, and we did our set, and as soon as we finished, the game started. So then that was about 250,000 people, so that was pretty good. And we when you do all those European festivals and you're playing in front of 80,000 people or 100,000 people or 70,000 people or whatever, that's all killer, But like I say, I've always wondered, is every single person of that 80,000 sized crowd, are they paying attention to the band? I don't know that they are. You hope they are, but if they're not, then it's understandable.
Right.
It's like, oh, some of these people are waiting for the band that's on the other stage, or waiting for the band that's coming on after you, or whatever. So there you go. You just try to, all the folks that are up in the front and anybody there that has their face pointed towards the stage, you try to give them a good time.
And that's definitely something to be said about the smaller shows, like in small clubs and stuff, where you get to be right up there, right, especially from a fan's point of from a fan's perspective, man, where we're able to be right there on the stage, basically, with the band, and just hear it blasting in our ears, man. There's nothing like
it. I agree, and there's when I'm with, like, say, a Testament or Death to All or anybody, and we're playing not the biggest place ever, and like a lot of times when you might hear the YouTube footage or see the YouTube footage afterwards, I do go to YouTube from time to time when I'm in the middle of a tour, just to check on the tempos that I'm playing. It's like, am I playing too fast? Am I playing too slow? Let me check these tempos. Okay, these are right in the ballpark of what I'm looking for, that kind of thing. But I always try to make it so you are hearing the acoustic drums, not the drums that are coming through the speakers, but you're hearing my actual pounding coming from the stage. And that's one thing that I've always noticed about YouTubes. It's like, you're hearing that drummer hitting the drums from the stage. It's not just the drums that are coming through the speakers. Like, you're actually hearing, loud pounding coming from the middle of the stage, and that's always been, I've always gotten a kick out of being able to do that. So
yeah, because drums are loud, man. For anybody that's ever been in a band knows, fucking, when you're in a room with a drummer and you're playing, it's loud as shit, man. You gotta turn your amp all the way up. It's loud as it.
Right. Especially this drummer. Absolutely.
Oh yeah. Well, one more question I want to ask is, looking back on your career, is there any crazy stories, any road stories, or anything that maybe that you never shared before that people might not know about that you can tell us about?
Well, man, there are just too many to mention, and that's the kind of thing that you've got all these crazy stories, ones that could fill up novels and things like that. until somebody puts you on the spot and says, hey, tell us a story. And you're like, then your mind goes blank. And you're like, I know a ton of them. And, they're cool stories. They're cool. It's not like, you're not throwing dirt at anybody. You got some cool stuff that you got to say. My entire career is full of kick-ass stories, that are just really fun and that sort of thing. Like I say, until, I've gotten to tell you a few of them already, like singing on the first Slayer record and, having, I haven't told you, it's a pretty well-known story, but there's when I was hanging around Slayer a lot, I was giving Dave Lombardo tips on how to play double bass because he was pretty new to it, and at that time he wasn't quite grasping it. And this is all stuff that I just kept quiet about for years and years and years until Dave started talking about it. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, if Dave's talking about it, then I can too. So I was his drum tutor for a while on the double bass, and so that's pretty good, all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, there's just a million kick-ass stories of, God, there was a time when Dark Angel we were traveling through Dunsmuir, California, and the cops pulled us over because they saw guys waving guns around in the RV, and, they pulled each member of the band out. I was driving the equipment truck, so I pull in to get some gas, and in Dunsmuir, California, I remember that well. And then I see the RV behind me pulling in, and it's being followed by like 12 cop cars. And I'm just like, what the hell is happening here? And so, I'm eyeballing it as I'm walking in to the tiny little Shell station, and I asked the guy, the guy just asked me, he's like, hey, are you with that RV out there? And I'm like, yeah, what's going on? And he's like, the California Highway Patrol has been calling everywhere up and down the I-5 here, warning them that there is a traveling, what they think is a meth lab with long-haired guys waving guns around inside it. And I'm just like, well, I know we have guns, but I know none of our guys are idiotic enough to be waving guns around. And then I was like, oh my God. Just like 2 days before, we had done some in-store in Utah, and right next to the in-store, there was a toy store, and everybody had bought water pistols that looked like real guns. And in 1989, that was kind of a rarity because most water pistols were green plastic, pink plastic, yellow plastic, just big goofy colors. But these were actual, and that's why the band was like, check this out, man, these are real looking guns, And so they're squirting each other inside the van with water pistols, and the cops, like, the guy told me, the guy behind the counter was like, they've been following you for like an hour. They've called everywhere, every restaurant, every hotel, every gas station. So we know that you were on your way, like now that you actually did pull in here, it's like, yeah, I'm the one where you guys pulled in. So they pulled each, I'm just watching this all go down. I'm watching 12 cop cars they all get out of the vehicle. They all have their high-powered rifles, focused on each member as they're calling each guy to come out of the RV. I'm in the gas station there just watching this all go down. There's my singer Ron, there's my guitarist Brett, there's Gons, there's our crew. They're putting everybody on the ground and screaming through the bullhorn at everybody. And I'm like, I've been driving for the last 10 hours, and I got to take a whiz. So I'm like, man, the the bathroom is outside. You got to go outside. They don't have an inside one. You got to go around the corner to the, the guy gives me the keys, and I go around the corner. And as soon as I walk around the corner there, they're like, "You MFer, you get back in that, you get back in that store right now. We're coming for you after we're done with these guys here." And I'm just like, what the hell? Jesus, I can't even take a leak, And sure enough, they get everybody on the ground. Everybody's spread-eagled on the ground there. All of a sudden, there's like 10 cops that come rushing the door there. They pull me out, and, they're frisking me, and they send me to the ground there. And like I said, I've been driving for 10 hours straight, so I'm exhausted. They put me on the ground face first, arms way out. I went to sleep immediately. I'm sleeping on the ground, and they're all screaming and yelling. And then, after a little, they've got us there for a half hour while they're going through the RV and stuff like that. And then, sometime into it, you hear a cop goes, we found the weapons. We found them." And then there's like a 5-second silence, and it's like, "Oh shit, they're water pistols." And so they thought they were seeing the headlines of, local police force busts, traveling, rolling meth lab, and
they thought they did some shit right there, man.
Right, and then they found a bag full of water pistols, and so they had to let us go. But they were,
I bet they were pissed.
Oh, they were, man. They thought they were all going to get commendations and headlines and all that kind of stuff, and they got a big box of nothing. So, but I got a good 15-minute nap out of the deal, so that was helpful.
Hell yeah! Well, that's an awesome story, Gene. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us, man. I'm about out of questions for you. Before I let you go, can I get you to make us a station tag real quick?
Yeah, man, of course. Zach, what do you want me to say?
Whenever you're ready, say something like, "This is Gene from Dark Angel, and you're listening to Metal Devastation Radio."
Hey, everybody, this is Gene Hoglan from Dark Angel, and you are listening to Metal Devastation Radio. Crank it up.
Fuck yeah. All right, dude. Well, what I'm going to do now is I'm gonna blast some more Dark Angel for these motherfuckers so they go crazy, man. And we can't wait to hear that new song, the new record, and everything that's coming forward, man.
Right on, Zach. Well, I sure do appreciate it. And to all your listeners, man, thank you for all your support. And definitely check us out when we come to town. And, check out that new single when it comes out. And we sure do appreciate everybody. And we're looking forward to seeing everybody on the road in 2025, 2026, you name it. So thank you very much.
Hell yeah. Well, we'll talk to you later, Gene. Thanks a lot.
Right on, Zach. You take care. Thank you.
All right, later, dude.
Later. Bye-bye.
There you have it, folks. Gene Hoglan from Dark Angel, live on the Zach Moonshine Show with Metal Devastation motherfucking radio. Like I said earlier, put your speakers in your windows, put them in your front lawns, put them in your neighbor's driveway, do whatever you got to do, man. If you don't see U-Haul trucks everywhere tomorrow, I don't even know, seriously, dude, you got to upgrade your stereo system, man. Crank this fucking shit up loud as a fuck. Here's some more Dark Angel, and I got some more shit from Gene, too, coming up, man. Some Strapping Young Lad, Death. Fuck yeah. Crank it up, motherfuckers.